Hi there, this is Pat Fader. Thank you for taking the time to watch this screencast. What I want to talk about today is remoting in PowerShell. So basically executing remote commands or pulling information off remote systems in PowerShell. There's two ways of doing it. I'll just refer to one as a legacy way and one as the new PowerShell way. Um, the legacy way, you've actually used it so far in our class. There's been some commandlets that you've executed that have had the computer name parameter, which has allowed you to, like, for example, pull the services off a remote system. It is possible uh, with one of those commandlets to specify multiple computers. So I could pull the services off of 5 machines in my environment if I wanted to. Uh, if I did that, those commands would execute sequentially. So, you'd first pull the services off machine 1, wait a while, then machine 2, then 3, then 4, and so on. The new way in PowerShell, actually, when we do it, you would cause that command to be executed simultaneously on your remote system. So I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a bit. The legacy way of doing things relies on some older protocols that are not firewall friendly. That's a good way of putting it. So if I'm on server 0 here and if I want to pull some information out of server 1 and server 2, no problem. That'll work fine with this legacy way of doing things. However, if I'm trying to go through a firewall, through a cloud, and access some servers 4 and 5 here, that would be an issue with the legacy way of doing things. All right, so, and I'm going to demonstrate all this. This is just kind of the, just the initial, let's talk in a 20,000 foot view of what's going on. The newer way of doing PowerShell remoting, we're going to see commands like invoke command and enter PS session, which will actually utilize the WS-MAN protocol, and I don't know what WS-MAN stands for, so I'm guessing MAN stands for management. What's interesting is this is something that Microsoft did not develop. There were some hardware and software developers that created this protocol that was designed to allow you to pull information from remote systems. So Microsoft saw this and said, this would be great, and they implemented that in PowerShell. And their implementation resulted in the WinRM service being created to run on your remote system. So the WS-MAN protocol implementation has been done on our Windows systems with this WinRM service. Now, anyways, with that, it's a big deal, right? What's the bottom line? The bottom line is that the traffic with this WS-MAN protocol kind of looks like HTTP and HTTPS traffic, so it actually is firewall friendly. It just relies on a single port as compared to the previous one that we were talking about. Again, works well with firewalls. The upside also is that when you execute a command like this invoke command that we'll do in a little bit, if you're accessing remote systems, it all happens in parallel. So you see things happening a lot faster. And also, depending on what you're pulling off these remote systems, the processing happens on the remote systems, which is kind of nice. If I'm pulling information off 32 systems, it's nice that workload is spread across those 32 systems, and then just the results are sent back to me. Whereas in the legacy way, most of the processing happens on the machine that's requesting the information from the remote system. So you can read more up on this. I really just wanted to give a quick overview of what's going on. And as I previously mentioned, the PowerShell remoting new, based on the WS-MAN protocol, supports a one-to-one remoting, so from server 0 to server 1. It also supports one-to-many, so from server 0 to servers 1, 2, 4, and 5. I don't know what happened to server 3 in there, but anyways, one-to-one and one-to-many. All right, let's just jump into it more, and let's look at my machines. I've got 3 servers. I've got 3 computers running. I have server 1, server 2, and our client. And these are the machines that we use for ITnet 111, 112, and 159. So you're familiar with these computers. If you want the script, shoot me an email and I'll send it to you. But there are some links that you, if you want to read up on them, just they're little one-pagers. It, again, gives a real quick overview of what this PowerShell remoting is all about. The legacy way of doing things, line 5, what I have here is basically, let's look at the commands that currently support, with the legacy commands that support remoting. And there's a number of them. So I executed the get command, and I'm pretty much saying only return the commands that have a parameter called computer name. So for example, well, these are them. So there's some. The nice thing about the newer PowerShell remoting way is that it supports all PowerShell commands, not just the limited set that we see here. So one of them that I see is get hotfix, get service. That's an easy one. Yeah, look. So get service. So let's say that I want to pull the services off a client computer. I'll run line 7 here. And because my firewall has not been configured properly, it's not going to work. I'll just pause this while we wait for it to time out. All right, that was about a minute, but it finally timed out. So what I could do to fix this if I wanted to is I could jump over to our Windows 10 client. Here it is. And I could log in and just turn off the firewall. There's a more elegant way of doing it. And but I'm just trying to not make this like a 50-minute screencast here. So let's just turn the Windows firewall off. There we go. Done. I'm just turning it off for our domain network profile because this machine's part of a domain. Incidentally, remoting works way better in a domain versus like in a workgroup environment. So if you get all excited about this and you want to use it at work, and you're not a domain-based environment, or the clients that you're trying to access are not part of your domain, it requires some additional setup on your end. It's not terrible, but it's just a few more steps. Okay, so our firewall is off. Let's go back and let's go to our server. Let's rerun line 7 again. Okay, good. So we went to the Windows 10 client. It executed get service, and it sent all that data back to us, and now on this local machine we can process it. And I'm not sure how the traffic is sent on line 7, but when we use the newer way of doing things, the traffic is encrypted, and it's sent as serialized. The objects on the remote system are serialized, and they are put into an XML format. They're sent back, across to our host computer here. The objects are then deserialized, and what you end up with is a copy of the objects. So you don't end up with the exact objects, but you end up with a copy of them. All right. Okay, so far we've kind of illustrated the legacy way of doing things, and I mentioned that it does support multiple systems if you want, but the problem is this just happens sequentially. So from a timing perspective, this would take a little bit longer than the newer way of doing things using the WS-MAN protocol. Also, what's not ideal about this is I don't know what the heck. Like, I see all these services are running, but I don't know which one is on the Windows 10 client and which one's on my server 2. We'll see that has been fixed as well with the WS-MAN protocol. All right. So now it's time to do some more exciting things. So I want to access my remote machine with this WS-MAN protocol, and they do give you a commandlet to test to see if it's been enabled or not. So let's run line 12. And it's working. Well, look at that. I thought I had disabled it to make it more exciting. If by default it's enabled on servers. I believe server 2012 and newer, it's enabled, and on Windows clients it's been disabled. But since I've been messing around before recording here, it's already turned on. If I did need to turn it on, I would simply go to my client machine and run this command here, enable PS remoting, and I'm still going to do it actually. And what it does is it starts that WinRM service. Remember, that's the service that implements this WS-MAN protocol. It actually creates what's called a listener to accept WS-MAN traffic. It's possible that you might have multiple pieces of software accessing information off a remote system, not just PowerShell. And each one of those applications would have a different listener, kind of like on a web server. You might have different ports mapped to different web pages. So anyways, it creates a listener that would support the protocol, and it also enables the appropriate firewall exceptions. Oh, you know what's interesting here? Actually, Here, we could break it real quick. Let's turn the firewall back on our client there, and let's just jump here and let's retest. Let's retest to see if this works or not. Ah, darn it, it's still working. All right, well, anyways, I'm still going to jump over here to our client, and I'm just going to enable PS remoting. So we're going to enable PowerShell remoting. So Windows RM is already set up to receive requests, okay, because I've run it once already, and looks like we're good to go. It also would have created the appropriate firewall exceptions. All right. I really like this PowerShell remoting. It's super. I just think there's so much that you can do with it. Just to be sure, let's test it one more time. I didn't break it, right? Okay, we're good. All right, let's see here. I feel like I've already done line 22. You know, pull the services off a remote system. And, all right. Let's look at there's multiple ways of pulling traffic off of a remote system. One commandlet that we can use is enter PS session. And this reminds me of a lot like if you've taken a Cisco class and you telnet into a remote device. Right now, anything I type in, if you look, the prompt has changed a bit, is occurring on my client. So, you know, if I do some old command, host name, Windows 10 client, or, you know, get net IP address, I think that might work. Yeah. This is the IP address of my Windows 10 client here. 192.168.20.101. All right. I think another one, get UI culture. Not too exciting, but anyways, we are accessing our system. Maybe more, you know, how get PS drive. All right, so there's a little bit about the PowerShell drives that exist on that remote system. If I want to see what's on the C drive of that remote system, get child item, C drive. Those are the files on my Windows 10 client. All right, so I've created a session. The session traffic is encrypted, and when I'm done, I just close the session. Good. So that's a one-to-one connection. I'm only accessing one computer at a time. I can also create, if you want to, I just threw this in just because, but you can, if you want, you can create a session like I have on line 28 here. So I'm going to create a new PowerShell session. And that's going to be, that session is going to be based, the information about that session is going to be put into a PowerShell variable that I call PSESS. I was trying to put in PowerShell session. I think I need one more S in there, but I'm a Scrabble player. I don't like wasting S's. So I've created currently a session with my server 2. I can now execute commands on that remote system with the invoke command commandlet. All right, and the syntax that we're seeing here is the commandlet is called invoke command. The parameter is session, so I'm going to specify what session I want to connect with, and that the one that I just created is called PSESS. And what am I going to do? I'm going to execute this get UI culture command. So if I just let me run lines 29 through 31. All right, so I just executed a command on my remote system, and I can tell it's server 2. You know, if I look in the command prompt down here, this is still referring to information about, you know, server 1, but this we've done on lines 29 and 30 is essentially told PowerShell to go execute some commands on a remote system. And I could put a whole bunch of stuff in here. Get UI culture, get net IP address, get PowerShell drives. I could format my drives, create some new partitions, you name it, I can do it. So anyways, all these commands now, when I run this, I only have to run line 28 once, are getting executed in my remote system. And there you go. When we're done, we should just get rid of the session. Good. So now if I try and run lines 29 through 33, I'm guessing we'll see an error because we closed our session. Yeah. I also could, and I don't know what I could also do something like this, which is interesting. I could open up multiple sessions on line 28. I think I can at least. Yeah, I can. And now I could run lines 29 through 33. I'm getting all kinds of information off my systems, off the client and off my server. Looks like all the client ones ran first, and then the server should run second. Here we go. Come on. Oh, my goodness gracious. A lot of information dumped out here. Well, I don't know what's going on. There's more information than I thought. Perhaps I should just, let's just try this real quick. Get rid of those. Yeah, let's try this again. It's from line 29 through 30. All right. Much more manageable amount of information. Anyways, when I'm done, I can close the session there. All right. So line 35 doesn't really, I was going to connect to my client and I was hoping to generate an error, but it's going to work because I already had I'd already run that enable PS remoting, but is what it is. Okay, we're going kind of fast with the content, and I guess I shouldn't complain. I guess you won't either, right? So far we've talked about executing commands on remote systems. We looked at the legacy way of doing it, and we've looked at the way that the newer way that uses that WS-man protocol. So what's left? We could go on and on and on, but I thought the last thing that I would show you is just a few more syntax commands, and also showing you how the ability to run a script on a remote system. So here's another syntax, another way of doing it. Invoke command, and I can just put a couple machine names in there, so I don't have to open up a session. I can just specify the machine names, and then pretty much what happens is a session gets created temporarily to execute these commands, and then when we're done, the session gets closed. So anyways, if I run lines 39 through 42, it just runs let's just do this. There we go. There we go. It runs it on the systems and then closes the session when we're done. Okay, good. So the last thing, and probably the most practical, is the ability to execute a script on a remote system. So I created a script before starting the screencast here. And if I take a look at it, let's see where I put it. I just called it check disk. And if we just take a look at it, it's kind of ugly. And there it is. I don't want to walk through this now. If you're in my PowerShell class, I recorded a whole screencast that walks through this. But what we're doing is, well, let's just run it. Let's see what the script does. So let's do this. Let me just run it. All right, so it prints out system summary server 1. It then prints out some information about the drive that's on our system. So it says that you have a C drive and some information about the C drive. It prints out the total free space. If I had multiple drives, it would keep adding up the free space. Then finally it prints out from information some IPv4 information. I wanted to create some kind of script. At MATC, we actually have scripts that are used to, for example, pull down or rewrite all the virtual machines in our lab computers. So what we're doing here is I'm just pulling information back from on my remote systems, but you could think about this. Maybe I would want, like, what I could do is I could cause my remote systems to go to a file server somewhere and update their virtual machine images. It's just an example. But anyways, these are the commands that make up my script. And if I want to, I can run that script here. So if I type in dir, that's the old school way, I guess. Get child item is the new way. I can see my script right here, check disk. And sometimes you're tempted, like, well, okay, to run it, I'm just going to type check disk.ps1. It's not going to work. You have to kind of specify the full path to the commandlet. So one way of doing it is, put the whwole thing in. Users / administrator / check disk.ps1. All right, so I ran the script. Or I could do this way. That / just essentially means the current working directory. Check disk. So I ran the commands. I executed a script. I should mention here. Let's do this. Let me jump to my Windows 10 client real quick. So this is kind of neat. There are some security aspects of being able to run a script on a system, and I think I'll talk about them really briefly, just so that this is something you might run across. So let me jump to a Windows 10 client. All right. All right, and I actually did beforehand, I copied that script to my client here. So let me run the script. Check disk. There it is. All right. So by default, Microsoft enables scripts to be run on their servers and disables them on clients. And there's different levels that you can configure as far as security goes and running scripts. And let me just type it's called this execution policy. So our execution policy is currently set to restricted on the client, and the execution policy on our server, get execution policy, is set to unrestricted. Well, that's not the default actually. And if I take a look at, I just did a quick search before hitting the record button here. Anyways, there's different execution policies that can be set up. There's different types of execution policies that you can enable on your servers or clients. On a server, the default is remote signed, which means that, hey, any scripts that you write on your server can be run on that server, and any scripts that you download can be run as long as those scripts are signed. So basically, scripts require a digital signature from a trusted publisher in order to be executed. Now, there's obviously a million ways around that. You could download the script, open it up, take all the commands that are in it, copy it, and then paste it into a PowerShell, tab here, and then run it, and it would work just fine. So I think, again, Microsoft is just trying to prevent the whoops, I clicked on something and I didn't read it carefully enough and accidentally run a script from a remote, from an untrusted location. So anyways, the default for servers is remote signed. Anything you create locally can be run, and anything that you download from internet just needs to be signed. There's a restricted policy, which basically means, which is a default for all Windows client computers, and scripts just cannot be run. And there's an undefined, which, well, I won't worry about that. There's an unrestricted, which means, boy, if it's there, I'll run it. Doesn't need to be signed. I can just run it. So let's just change the scope on my Windows 10 client so that I can run a script. So if get execution policy gets it, I'm gonna hope that set execution policy sets it. So I want to set the execution policy, and here they are, all signed, bypass, default, remote signed. So I think I will just set this to be remote signed, so I can run scripts that I have created locally, and if I download one, it has to be digitally signed. All right. Sure. Yes to all. A lot of times, if you don't want to get bothered with those prompts, are you sure? You can. There's typically a force parameter we can set, and it just runs. All right. So now that I've changed the execution policy, let's see if I can run that script now. All right. So there you go. You can see that we have a little. Oh, actually, on this Windows 10 client, what I did before hitting the record button here is I added an extra hard disk, so my virtual machine has a 15 gigabyte disk as well as the 100 gigabyte disk. So there you have it. So let's go back to my server and let's finish this up. All right. Okay, so here we go. Invoke command. So this is really neat. So I have a script. I have a local script. I don't know why this is here. That's wrong. Oh, that is so funny. I just saw something on my screen. I thought it was a backtick. It was actually a piece of dirt on my monitor, so I was trying to erase it, and you couldn't see it, but I could. So all right, so now I'm going to execute this script here, check disk.ps1. That's on my local system, and I'm going to run it on my client. Amazing. So there it is. Now, the execution policy on the client does not matter. So all that matters is that the execution policy on this system has to allow us to run scripts. So I could go back to my client and change that, set execution policy to restricted. Let's do that force thing so we don't get bothered with it. All right, so I can prove here that I can't run scripts, but when I go back to my server and I run it here, it still works. Good. I also mentioned the advantage of using this WS-man protocol in PowerShell. With PowerShells, I can execute these commands on remote systems, and they actually happen simultaneously. So if you have some scripts that take a long time to run, it's going to be a lot faster if you execute them simultaneously. Here, let's put all three machines in. Server 2016-1, 2016-2. I think this will work. There we go. So I've got the information. I've got the information from my client. I've got the information from server 1. And I have the information from server 2. Good stuff. Maybe one more thing here. I'll throw a bonus in here. So we've talked about executing scripts. We've talked a little bit about the execution policy. The last thing I'll mention, as far as remoting goes, we have the legacy way of doing things. Where we have the computer name parameter. We've talked about using this WS management protocol for executing for commands or pulling data off remote systems. And there's one other way for remoting that's super easy. It's built into the ISE here, this integrated scripting environment, and I can just say new remote PowerShell tab. Computer name, W10 client as an example. Username. I'm just curious. Let's hit connect. Yeah, the nice thing about a domain is it uses my current logged in credentials. So since I'm logged on as a domain admin, I can do this. Yeah, so now I have a remote PowerShell tab connecting me to my Windows 10 client. All right. Well, that's more than there's a lot more to this. Obviously, but this is a great starting point. Our script, like I mentioned, that we run remotely or can run remotely in our labs is a script to reimage our host computers. So when you're pulling down a couple hundred gigabytes to a machine, it's nice to have those commands occur in parallel as opposed to, simultaneously as opposed to sequentially. So that's where using a new way of doing things would really pay off. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to watch this, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks. Bye.